Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, I'm going to take a quick look at a color comparison between the GH5 and the S5 of what I would consider the three major food groups of color profiles, which would be the natural, which I love using, Cinelike D, and then the different vlogs that each of these cameras have. If you're new here, my name is Caleb and I've been doing freelance video production since 2012. But this channel is to help you make your own videos, whether you just started or you've been making them for a while, whether you use the GH5, S5, or any other camera. If that's something you're interested in, make sure you hit that subscribe button. All right, so these shots I have, comparing these different color profiles are nothing fancy. They're just sample shots. But what I try to do with each camera is get the settings as close as possible with each camera so that the shot, the framing, the color, the aperture, everything tried to match up as closely as possible so that we could get a pretty good look at each image. So I got my settings dialed in, and my exposure, I was only using a variable ND and zebra stripes to adjust my exposure. And then later on in these different clips, you'll see the actual settings of each color profile that I used. The only one that I didn't make any adjustments to was the vlog, because you can't really make adjustments to the vlog. But I dialed in my settings for the GH5 on those different color profiles and then matched them on the S5. Now, all of these images are in 4K 10-bit 422, even the natural color profile in Cinelike D. With those two profiles, you probably would be able to get away with an 8-bit color. However, with the vlog, you're going to want to be in that 10-bit 422. So the first one I'm going to start with is the natural color profile. And on the GH5, what you can see is that I have it at -2, -1, -1, -5, and 0. And I love using the natural color profile. But when it comes to the S5, you can already see a pretty big difference in the dynamic range, even with the natural color profile. So I really like that. And I feel like the colors might just be a little bit more saturated with the S5. Now, these clips are not graded at all, so you can tell that right at a camera, the natural color profile looks pretty good on each one. Maybe the GH5 being just a little bit darker in some of those shadows, but the natural color profile on each camera gives a really good image, I feel like. All right, next we move to Cinelike D, and this is a profile that I don't really use a whole lot. So right at a camera, you can see my settings, and then I added the leaming LUT to the image just so you could see what it looks like with the colors corrected, because Cinelike D is going to be a little bit more of a flat profile. It's not super flat like vlog, but a lot of people like using it because you do have some more control over that dynamic range and some flatter colors, which you can really bring out. And again, on the S5, you just have a little bit more dynamic range and a brighter image. I feel like it's just a little bit more saturated, and you can see my settings for the S5 that I was using to try to match up. Now, there's a couple highlight settings on the S5 that I didn't make any adjustments to. That's why you see those couple extra numbers on there. So here's a comparison shot that you can see the different dynamic range, especially in the shadows. And then once we get to vlog, I think this is where one of the biggest differences is going to come, is because it's a light version on the GH5, which you may or may not like. It's not going to be a full S curve, but the S5 has that full vlog. With these, I made just a little bit of an adjustment with the exposure in post because the image I might have had just a little bit too dark. I might have had my zebra stripes off just a little bit, but you can definitely see that there's a difference with the image. And with this one, I actually like the vlog L on the GH5 just a little bit better than the vlog on the S5. But again, you're going to have better dynamic range with the S5 and just a little bit more control over that image. Now, I've been using the GH5 for so long that, you get used to those colors, get used to grading those colors. And in this video, I didn't do any grading. I did make some corrections with the leaming LUT and a little bit with exposure, but you just get so used to shooting in a color profile profile that you're comfortable with, especially on cameras that you've been using for so long, that when you start seeing some of these other images from some of these other cameras, you get a little giddy. I think one of the things that I could really get used to and love with the S5 is just having that dynamic range, especially in the shadows. I have noticed, especially with the GH5, that sometimes I have to overexpose some of the image to get those shadows where I want them. Let me know some of the things that you saw with these clips down in the comments. I'd love to get a conversation started about the GH5 and the S5 and some of these color comparisons. Remember, this was only about what I call the three major food groups of the color profiles: the natural, Cine-D, and Vlog. So if you have other opinions on some of the other color profiles, toss those in the comments as well. Now, it'd be awesome if you have time, stick around, watch one of these videos that's popping up on your screen right here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.